save. Better cook it in your pocket, and this one the grave. And I know you won't tell what I said. Am I good enough? Keep a secret. I'll ever be enough. If I change, would I find love? I'm calling out these pretty, pretty lies, pretty, pretty lies, pretty, pretty lies, lies, pretty, pretty lies, pretty, pretty lies, pretty, pretty lies, lies. We were meant to be perfectly imperfect, such a beautiful mess.
Good morning, everyone. How is everyone doing? In one word or less. Welcome to Epiphany Station. My name is Maddie. I am the pastor here at Epiphany, and I want to welcome you and I want to thank you for being here. You are joining us in the very last week of our sermon series called Pretty Little Lies. It has been 2 months now in which we have been digging into the little niceties, the little cliches, the little nicely gift-wrapped hand grenades that when they go off in our lives cause such damage and destruction to our faith and to our belief in who God is. A few months ago, when Pastor Jeff and myself and Millie all sat down to really put detail to this sermon series, our lie today was the first one on the whiteboard. It was the first one that came to mind. It was the first one that we wanted to tackle and we wanted to address. I don't know if it's the most common, but I certainly wouldn't be surprised if it was. Our lie today is that God will never give you more than you can handle. It is so beautiful. It is so pretty. You will see it everywhere. You'll see it scrawled on church walls in people's homes. You'll find it on Pinterest if you really want to. And you can make all sorts of things out of it because it sounds so good. It is a promise that we so desperately want to believe that never will we have to deal with more than we can handle. Now, you might have heard of it, you might have used it, you might have believed it. Heck, you might have also been one of those people that wants to punch someone in the face because they try to use it to address your situation. Now, what happens is, with this lie that God will never give you more than you can handle, is that it is used to try and soothe and solve every concern, every care, every worry, every doubt, every fear that could ever come your way. Because as human beings, the thing we fear the most is that which we cannot know, which we cannot handle, which we cannot understand. So if there's a promise that that's never going to happen to us, then life is going to be pretty sweet and pretty awesome. Now this, like most lies, actually is just a twisting of the truth. It's a misquote, really. It stems from a misquote of the Bible. And in the book of 1 Corinthians in chapter 10, we're going to find out where it comes from. Now this whole chapter of 1 Corinthians chapter 10 is actually about sin. It's about sin. It's about how God's people in the past have sinned and how now as a result some of the things that have happened to them. And the author Paul is going to use this chapter to help believers of his day and us to understand what we can do to get out of sin, what we can do to get away with it, what we can do to flee it. And he's really only talking about sin and the temptation to do it. But nestled in this whole chapter of context, we find this little gem that people love to misquote. In 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13, it says, "The temptations in your life are no different from what others experience." That's why Paul brought the whole beginning of the chapter of people of the past. "And God is faithful. He will not allow the temptation to be more than you can stand. When you are tempted, he will show you a way out so that you can endure." Now, it's easy to see in reading that anybody with half an IQ point can tell what he's talking about. When it's like that and you've got a little bit of context, it's the understanding. What Paul is saying is God has a hatred of sin. He has a hatred of everything that would take you away from him. Therefore, he will never make you taste it. He will never make you act on it. He will always, always give you an ability to leave sin alone. He will always give you an escape from it. Now we take that, and what's happened to that is it's been extrapolated out to saying God will give you an escape from everything. God will take anything coming your way and hand you and offer you an opportunity to get out of it. No matter what you've done, no matter what's been done to you, there will always be escape that you will not have to take sorrow, trial, or pain into your life. And the reason that has happened is that although we read a certain translation of the Bible, there are others out there that can really kind of misconstrue. And usually it's those that are what we call paraphrases. They aren't actually, narratives as how it was originally written, translated. They're more kind of colloquial. They're more all about just being able to understand it. And one of those is called The Message. The Message is actually a Bible I like to read because it gives you the broader scope of things in nice, easy to read chunks. But some of the detail is lost because in 1 Corinthians 10:13, The Message says this: all you need to remember is that God will never let you down. He'll never let you be pushed past your limit. He'll always be there to help you come through it. That is taken and run with to a bumper sticker manufacturer which says, sure, God will never give you more than you can handle. And we have stickers and t-shirts and mugs, and we have wall decals and everything. Now, the message is not in of itself wrong, but in the context of just picking out that, you can be easy to see how now, oh, okay, God is not going to push me past my limit. God is not going to do that to me because he is good and because he is faithful. He will never make me do that. And it is used now to soothe all of your pains and all of your worries and all of your concerns and all of your fears. So much as to say that your financial situation, the burden that you're facing right now, will never tip you over the edge. To say that the addiction that you have, whether it be to anger, greed, lust, drugs, or alcohol, that will never destroy you. That the loss that you are feeling, the intimate personal loss, will never be too much for you. That your marriage isn't going to push you over the edge, that your parenting is not going to wreck you, that your work is not going to mess with you, and that your health is never going to be so bad that you cannot handle to face another day. That is what the cliche is trying to say. But as we take it and we understand that that's probably not true, then we need to understand what is true. Now, you've only been sat down for about 5 minutes, but I'm going to make you all stand up. If you can't stand, you're going to raise your hand, but everyone else, stand up. 10 points for you two for standing up first. Thank you very much. Bit of crowd interaction at church. It's fine. So, I'm going to allow you to immediately sit back down if you have never interacted with anything in your life that you could not handle. Go ahead and sit down. Go ahead and sit down if you've never been against something, never faced anything, never had a challenge that you could not handle. All right, thank you very much. You can all sit down. Something about what we just experienced shows us that someone is lying. Somebody is lying. And what happens is when this lie explodes in our face, what it tends to do is it tends to erode trust. Usually not in the person who misquoted it, not in the bumper sticker, and not in the t-shirt, but in God himself. Because what we just showed amongst us, is what we proved, is that I think 100% of people have faced something, have gone through something that they couldn't handle. So either God is lying, and therefore should not be trusted, or this lie, this cliche that is so widely accepted and used, needs to be put to death. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to prove one of those two things. We're going to get into the Bible in a second. If you don't have a Bible, we have a stack out at the Next Step station. Millie'd love to grab you one, or you can get one on your way out today. Otherwise, the text is going to be behind us. But we love people to have their own Bible that they understand so they can read it themselves. But we're going to dig into the Bible because we're going to dig into what God actually thinks about suffering. What he says about the difficulties and the trials and the sorrows of life. And what we're going to see is, there you go. What we're going to see is that, in fact, Jesus, the Son of God, has a completely different mindset towards suffering, towards pain, towards difficulty, towards trial, towards more than you can handle, than what the cliche might offer. So where we're going to be in the Bible is in Matthew chapter 26, and just to give you a bit of background of where that is, it's towards the end of Jesus' life. He's done his big sermons on the mount, a lot of his teaching and healings, and he's kind of refuted a lot of the idiocracy and the hypocrisy in the church. And now what he's going to do is he's going to go and die for that. He's going to go and die for us. He's going to go and die for what he came to do, and he knows it's coming. He's well aware. He's had his sit-down meal with his closest, the Last Supper. Judas has run off to go and betray him, and now with his closest friends, they're going to retreat to a place called Gethsemane. Gethsemane is an olive grove that they would frequent to reset and to retreat and to replenish themselves. But now this time, Jesus is going to go for a different reason. So as we find it in Matthew chapter 26, verse 36 through 39, we're going to see this. It says, "Then Jesus went with them to the olive grove called Gethsemane, and he said, 'Sit here while I go over there to pray.' He took Peter and Zebedee's two sons, James and John, and he became anguished and distressed. He told them, 'My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me.' He went on a little farther and bowed his face to the ground, praying, 'My Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine.'" This is Jesus. This is the guy who, if anyone could handle anything, it's this guy. And yet here he is, saying to his loved ones, saying to his close friends, "My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death." Doesn't that sound like more than someone can handle to you? And here he is saying it. And here he is also saying, "God, my Father," it's not being timid here. He's, "Please, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go through this. If it can be taken from me, take it." And we well know, if you've ever heard the story of Jesus, that God doesn't take it from him. God doesn't stop what is about to happen to him. God doesn't slap a magical band-aid on it and everything's healed and everything's fine. And if God doesn't do that for his son and the type of suffering he's about to go through, then what does that mean for us? What can we expect? When we feel that our soul is being crushed with so much grief to the point of death, what can we expect God to do about that? Should we rely on the cliche that he is going to rescue every little thing, that he is going to sweep in and never give us more than we can handle? Or instead, is he going to do what he's always done with people's grief, and with people's suffering, and with people's pain? I have the privilege this morning of introducing for you a video that has been recorded by us, by one of our own, Nolan Nordlands. Most of you will know him or have known him. He plays bass and guitar in our worship team. And the reason that I've asked Nolan to give his testimony is over the last year, Nolan has experienced more grief than I hope ever to come across. Nolan has experienced more loss and pain at his age than most of us ever will. And what we are going to hear is what he's been through and what he has experienced through it, and what it has driven him towards and what it has driven him away from. So we're now going to roll that video for you.
Hey, my name's Nolan. I've been coming here to Epiphany Station for about 3 years. I started coming shortly after I got married in 2013, and this church has been a really big part of my life. I've been heavily involved in many different things, and I would say all of my best friends are here at this church, and it's helped me through some really difficult times too, especially over this last year. You see, I was married for almost 2 years, but my wife Gretchen, she was also part of the worship team like I was, and still am, at least currently. She was a great singer and everything. It was pretty amazing to see how good of a singer she was, because what a lot of people didn't know was that she actually had cystic fibrosis. So that's, for those of you who don't know, it's primarily a lung disorder. So she only had about 30% lung capacity, and yet she was up on stage singing her heart out, and she was really, really good at it. And before last Easter, the day before, we were prepping at the Ralph, and we were singing songs and setting everything up, and it had been a long day already, but we were heading home, and before we even got out of the building, she started coughing coughing a lot and lots of blood. So we rushed her to the hospital, and by the time we got there, she had already stopped. But obviously we needed to be there. So they said that there was an infection in her lungs, which is not uncommon, but it was actually causing some irritation on one of her arteries in her lungs, and it was bleeding into her lung. So we ended up going down to Fargo, and late one night, about 2 o'clock in the morning, Gretchen had another attack, and this time there was just too much blood for her to be able to cough up, for her lungs to clear. She ended up going about 13, 14 minutes before she was able to start breathing again. And I knew that meant it was almost impossibly long odds for her to survive, just because of the toll that would take on her brain. But she was still alive. They were able to revive her, and they decided that they needed to put her in a hypothermic state for the next 2 days as a way of hopefully keeping brain swelling down, and then they'd warm her back up at that point and see where she's at. And those next 2 days were really difficult for a lot of obvious reasons, but they were also good in a way. Just having family around and being able to support each other. So anyways, that Friday came and they warmed Gretchen back up and did tests to see what her brain function was, and there was no response. And so I sat in a room with her sisters and her mom, and we talked for a while and decided that we should let her go. So a week from Good Friday, just 5 days after Easter, I was saying goodbye to my wife for the last time and driving home from Fargo at a widower at 27. And it just wasn't supposed to be that way. I mean, I knew she had the disease. It's not like that was a surprise, and I knew it was always a possibility. But I just assumed that there would be more time than just, not even 2 years. So that was really, really difficult, and I was kind of expecting it to just crumble. But I had a lot of support. A lot of you guys were there for me. And there were people helping me out for a few months. There's a lot of time spent just talking to people, and people sharing my burdens, and those first couple of months were extremely difficult, but it was it went better than I was expecting, I guess. And I felt like I made a lot of progress after just a few months. But that's when things started to change, I guess. Once I got to the point where I felt more or less normal when I was out in public, I feel like that's when things started to take a darker turn for me personally. Because I felt normal when I was with people, so people just saw me as being, my normal self. And, it had been months since Gretchen had passed away, so, people just naturally move on. But when I was at home by myself, I had not moved on at all, not even close. And I don't know, I think I buried it under trying to stay busy, and I was really busy. And I don't know, there's probably a lot of different things that kind of piled up to negatively affect things, but it was in January of this year that things were the worst. It was just really dark, and I guess I didn't really realize how bad it had gotten until I kind of pieced together a few different conversations that I'd been having with different people, and realized that I had really just lost hope. Plain and simple, I didn't feel like I had anything to look forward to or had any purpose. I was just going through life, doing the things that I had to do or was supposed to do. And, that loss of hope, I saw that kind of manifest itself in a few different ways. And I could sum it all up by saying I felt like I just lost control completely. So there were lots of really small things that I was struggling with, just overeating, oversleeping. If there was anything I wanted to do, like I would just do that over things that I needed to do. I was not handling my responsibilities well. And so there was all that, and then on a more deep level, there were sins that I used to deal with in the past that started resurfacing. So I noticed myself getting angrier quicker and having outbursts and taking things out on people that did not deserve it at all. And the thing that was really disappointing to me with all of it is I used to struggle a lot with pornography, and that started coming back as well. And I did not want that to gain a foothold in my life again. And yet, here I was dealing with the same thing. So it all kind of came together one night when, after I'd been talking 3 different conversations with Jeff, with Maddie, and with Wyatt, and I kind of finally realized that this wasn't just something that I needed to, grit my teeth and get through, which is exactly what I had been thinking. I felt like, well, these are all small things, or like, all these like self-control things. That's just small. I just gotta do better. I gotta plan out my day, and I gotta stick to my guns when whatever temptation comes up. But then, these bigger things started coming along, and I was realizing, no, this is a lot deeper than that. And I finally realized, like, this is a spiritual battle that I was going through, and I know I'm not going to win that fight by myself. So just the middle of the night, it kind of hit me, and I got down on my knees beside my bed, and I prayed just that God would break through that spiritual battle that I was clearly losing. And it wasn't like an instant change, but I would say over the next week things got drastically better. And still not perfect, but I've come even further since then. And there still is spiritual attack from time to time, but it was clear the difference before and after. I couldn't handle those things, plain and simple. I wasn't able to do it, and yet I always seem to think that I can. And depending on God is a lesson that I've had to learn countless times. And I always end up getting back to a point where I'm like, all right, well, I just have to dig down deep, and I know what I'm supposed to do. I just have to do it. But I can't. My sinful nature won't let me do it. And I absolutely need God to pull me through all of those struggles that I have. My name is Nolan, and this is my epiphany.
Nolan couldn't be here with us this weekend. That's why we had him record his video. But thank you, Nolan. Thank you for being willing to share that. We don't believe in sugarcoating anything here. Neither does Nolan, neither does Jesus. Jesus once said in the book of John, chapter 16, verse 33, that here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart because I've overcome the world. Jesus never said, the Bible never said, God never wanted you to think that he's going to take away every difficulty you will ever face. It's just not true. In fact, when Jesus goes to the lengths that he does, and with witnesses and testimony, and with us all standing at the same time, we can say, this stuff's coming. It's going to happen again and again and again. If we can just step out of the naivety and get our heads out of the sand, we can see that it is going to. And we need to prepare for this stuff. We need to be able to take heart, and there's something else going on, because God will give you more than you can handle. God will let you go through more than you can handle. He will ask you to walk through more than you can handle. Heck, he will even command you to go and do things that are more than you can handle. So if this is all true, and this is a fact of life, why? Why would a good and loving and faithful God let Nolan go through that? Let his own son go through that. Let you and I go through these things. What is the purpose? Well, I believe the purpose is exemplified by what Jesus did with his. I think the purpose is supposed to drive us to God. It is supposed to make us go to the one who can actually handle it. Very much like a child with a skinned knee, who in that moment, it is the end of the world. And they cannot handle it, and they're overwhelmed, and they run to their parent, clinging to their parent, wanting them to do something about it. A parent can't make the pain go away. They can't heal it. But a parent knows that it's not going to be there forever. A parent knows that it's going to be made right. And that is the kind of hope and encouragement and love that a parent shows to a child. And I believe that is what God wants us to do with our pain, with our suffering, and with the more than we can handle, is to go running to him. Is to go running to him and say it's more than we can handle, so we can learn to depend on him. So we can actually see him for what he was supposed to be, this loving Father. I believe it is Christ's role in this moment, in the Garden of Gethsemane, so we can see how this is done. As he says to his friends, my soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. As he goes on a little farther, bows his head and his face to the ground, saying, with exclamation, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me, yet your will be done, not mine. As Jesus exemplifies this, he exemplifies that he does a few things in his trial, in his pain, in his sorrow, in his suffering. Things that his followers, things that people who want to be about God, who want to follow Jesus, can take and do things with it instead of hiding under the blankets, going under the bed and just hoping it's all going to go away, of actually facing it down head on. There's three things that I take from what Jesus did and how he handled his sorrow, and they're going to be our next steps today. In your program, as it was handed to you as you walked in, on the inside of that is its three next steps down at the bottom of the page. I want you to write these down, because heck, you might not need them today, but you will some point. You might not need to know them now, but you will have a need to know in the future. The first thing that we notice about Jesus when he's going through this is that he's not alone. He does not isolate himself in his pain and his trial and his sorrow. In fact, he wraps himself with his closest friends. He wraps himself with his fellow believers, his fellow followers of God. For him to be able to say, stay here and watch with me, you don't do that if you lock yourself in a room. In fact, what he did is he took all of his friends, and he actually put his peripheral friends on the periphery and took his 3 closest. James, John, and Peter, his most beloved, his most devoted. He took those 3 and he said, come with me, stand watch over me, pray with me for what I am going through. The first next step is to get church. Is to get church. It's not to go to church. It's not to go somewhere on a Sunday, but to actually get church. Get what God intended you to get when you join together with a body of believers. It's people that you can say, here is what is going on. Will you stand with me? Will you watch with me? Will you pray with me while I go through this? We are not supposed to go through things isolated. The next step is to be honest. I think one of the greatest things about this example of Jesus and of Nolan and of those of others that I know is at some point you can't help but just be honest. Is it really sucks? To be raw and to be real, be authentic with people around you, but also with God. I think we have a hesitancy to get angry in front of God, to be frustrated in front of God, because he'll never give you more than you can handle, so why should you be upset? Instead, here we see Jesus basically bending down, laying down on the ground with his face down in complete subjection, saying, I can't do it. Take it away. I don't want it. You just imagine him balling up his fists in frustration that he knows what he is about to go through. And when we are angry and when we are defeated, it is then when we can feel most ashamed, especially if we're a good Christian, to be able to show that to people and show that to God. But be honest. Express yourself in the way that Jesus did. And third, your next step is to fear the greater suffering. To fear the greater suffering. Get church, be honest, fear the greater suffering. When Jesus says, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me, he's not in fact talking about what we might think he's talking about. He's not talking about his arrest or his humiliation, or the slap across the face, or the whip across the back, or his crucifixion, or his torture, or his death. He's not talking about those things, because those things pale in comparison to the greatest suffering he's about to go through. Jesus is about to be, for the first time ever, separated from God. For the first time, he is going to be removed from God the Father as he takes on the sin of the entire world, and he is separated for a moment from that relationship. When Jesus started his earthly ministry, he was tempted by the devil to give up that relationship. The devil gave him many other options to seek his own glory or to have relationship with the devil instead. And now again at the end of his earthly ministry, that temptation has returned because a greater threat is at hand. And the devil would like us to think that walking away from God in those temptation moments will solve the problem. When Jesus says, I want your will to be done, not mine. As much as he's saying, I want to go through this for you, he's also saying, help me. Help me maintain my relationship with you. Help me walk with you. Help me to continue to have a love for you while I know I go through this. Keep me. Keep me close. Keep me protected from the enemy. Keep me safe from temptation. Give me those escapes. Because the trial and the suffering, those things are bad. But what Jesus is saying is the greater suffering is to be removed from relationship with God. And that is always the threat when we're in acute pain or continuing suffering or frustration, is for us to remove ourselves in relationship with God. And Jesus says that is much worse than anything else that can happen. This stuff's going to come. We need to accept it's going to come and that it has come. And with these things, we can choose to respond to what is ahead of us, but also to deal with what has gone behind us. And if these things can teach us a dependence on God, if these things can teach us to call upon his name, then they can be used for our good. They can be used to develop in a faith for us that is not weak, but is instead rock solid and centered on Jesus Christ and who God is. Like I said, we're at the end of the Pretty Little Lies series. We've covered 8. There are millions more out there. There are so many things that want to take you away, that want to remove your relationship with God. So many lies out there, and if we are ignorant to the truth, if we don't know what is real, we can easily be distracted by them. But this is why you have a God who holds the truth in his hand, and if you would but ask him, he will tell you what it is. It's why he wrote the Bible, so that if you will but study it and understand what it's actually saying about you and your life, you'll not be made a fool of. And if you realize that he has a church who is put around you so you can understand how to love God and how to love people, then you won't be alone in your quest. We've gone through all these messages like good people go to heaven and Christianity's for the weak-minded. All these different things that people just throw out there as fact. And we've refuted every single one over and over again. If you've missed any of them, you can get them all online at epiphany.com. But we've gone after these specifically because it's not often the big lies like, no, God just doesn't exist. But it's the little lies. It's the little lies that weed their way in, that do the damage, and that can wreck our faith. And if we are to be a people who love God and love people, we can't afford to let those things take root. Would you all please pray with me? Father God, we ask that you would keep us. That as we go through strife and trial and worry and sorrow, that you would keep us close. That we wouldn't help but be able to see where you are and how we connect with you and how you can love us through those things. Help us to learn to call upon your name. Help us to learn to step out in faith even in those trials. To be willing to trust in your name, to be willing to trust in the promises you've given regardless of the circumstances that we're in. Father, help us to be your people and help us to follow the example of Christ. Help us to follow the example of Nolan. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.